Alright, let's go on. Let's go on. Sorry, what I needed to put the cams and everything back because I was removing everything yesterday when friends arrived. Completely forgot to set things in the morning. Needed to put cams and stuff in place. Back again. Alright. There we go. There we go. Alright. Alright. York Hogs, hello. How you doing, man? Wait a second. What you guys are talking about there? Who? Who? No, the forest stuff? Alright. The forest stuff. Alright. The fight should have been ready, reverted back in code and early access. Well, I mean, that's kind of like, you know, inevitable. They either needed to delay it again, or they could just do that. I think that's not really that bad of a thing that they did it this way. I don't think that's a bad thing, eh? Especially since early access titles kind of get a little bit of a bonus, technically second launch and everything too, you know. Hello, done. How's the life? It can, it can. If I have time, I will. If I have time, I will. Alright, let's go. There we go. Get the water. Get the coffee. Which one was started already? This is the thing. Seems like a bunch of coffee here. Whole bunch of it. See what goes this thing. Well, I mean, as I said, they had a choice. They had a choice there. They either would delay the game again. Then, yeah, sure, they could release it with no early access, I guess. But they already did so many delays and stuff that they just decided to kind of, you know, whatever. God knows how many times we will need to release. People getting mad. Let's just, you know, release the early access and whatever. See how it goes. So, I mean, it is kind of weird, for sure. For sure. I do agree with that. But another option was just, you know, keep delaying it. Just keep delaying it. Coffee is this one. This is the Ethiopian Yurgachev nut. Nothing super fancy, but good. Eh? Nothing crazy fancy, but it's nice. They open pretty fancy. Mostly kind of the same price here, almost as like Brazilian or something. Depends on the region though. Like some places can be quite expensive. This one is pretty much the same as like Brasilia Cerrado and stuff. Now they reach with the 2 billion copies sold now. You need to actually try to make anything good. Well, I mean, I don't think so. Like, why? Why would you? That's kind of like weird logic there. That way you can say like a lot of early access is already should this. After succeeding, they should just, peace out. I mean, some probably did. Sure. And they just gonna keep, pumping some stuff, pumping some content. They probably already like had a bunch of stuff going that they most likely maybe even needed to kind of like cut from the early access version just so they can release like something unpolished, something unfinished. So they already most likely had that going because it's supposed to release already. Everyone bought Cyberpunk day one? I don't think so. Yeah, I think a lot of people bought it way later. And that's early access. It's different. Full release and early access is a different story. With early access games, there's like a whole bunch, lots. Like you can even like see in chat, for example, lots of people who always wait for full release instead of early access. So they basically have another big launch coming for them later. That if they do things right and everything, it will bring them same amount that it did right now, easily. Because they're top one wishlisted. If you're top one wishlisted, you want to make people who have you in the wish list to see, that you do stuff, so they can consider buying your stuff. True, untrue. Well, I mean, you can always get something like Game Pass, for example. And you'll get a whole bunch of games with not a lot of money. That the full release will even remotely come close to the sales numbers of the early access. It depends how they will pull it. If it will be good early access, something like Forest 1, like Subnautica or something like this, Dead Cells, then they can make way more. Like look at Dead Cells, for example, from early access and everything into release. And now after release, they keep fucking pumping and keep fucking selling, no problems. So basically, kind of like saying that they're just gonna like roll it out and then forget about it is just kind of do this. Like you have the chicken that lays golden eggs, and you refuse to feed it. Cyberpunk is a different story, though. As I said, Cyberpunk was full release. It was an early access release. First things first. And second, it also got so much shit that there is still probably a lot of people omega luling whenever they hear about it. And that exactly comes back to the situation when, if you handle the early access well with updates and stuff, then people gonna be buying it because there is no negativity going about the game. Normies really know, and I'm pretty sure they do. Pretty sure they do. I mean, let's be real, Forest is not exactly the normie game. Like, it's not, the game that attracts normies who saw, like, advertisements on Super Bowl or something. It's the game that people already most likely, know from some other ways. Because you don't really generate that many wish lists on your own just from people browsing Steam. You kind of like, there's gonna be people looking for the game. So it's people who watch streamers, people who watch YouTubers, people who already played the first game. So it's more exquisite audience, I would say, not just like some random who saw ads on TV and went to Steam and bought the game, Well, that's the thing, and people on YouTube who watch YouTube and stuff is not exactly already, your average normie who doesn't know. Not to mention that a lot of those YouTubers probably mentioned that it's early access and everything. So yeah, it's not normies that are completely uneducated. I'm pretty sure a lot of people know perfectly what early access is. They might kind of suck, reading some other things, some details, why it is early access and stuff, for example. But they do know what it is. And a lot of them did get a burn on DayZ and everything in early access, for example. A lot of normies too. So I wouldn't underestimate the audience. I already had like a $1 trial on the Game Pass. I see, and you can wait for cooldown and get it again. That's how it works. That's how it works. Cyberpunk was, Keanu, Pog, John Wick, me buy. I don't know what video games is, but I buy. Every 6 months, yeah. Blood Bowl 3, we'll see. If I'll manage to get my hands on it, maybe. Maybe. And basically now everything is kind of like if I get the key from theirs, then I play. If I don't, then I mostly don't, unless it's, Game Pass or something, because buying shit nowadays from here is a little bit of a pain whenever it's available, and it's not always available even. It's mostly negative. How so? People molding there. What happened with that? What happened with that? You right. So let's see. What we gonna read? For today. Fucked up everything. Then son, the skill, the skill. Testing before releasing. I see. Classics. Classics. All right. Let's see. Some weeb stuff. Then I see. They did fuck up there. I see. Then all right. At least a new one, but it's worse than the previous. Yeah. Typical. Typical. Oh man, takes forever. Yeah, some of the fresh ground and some types of coffee just takes forever until it starts actually doing the drip. Come on. Slowly starting. Very slowly. Alright. Exploring the evolving Japanese indie game scene. Japanese developers and the organizations supporting them on Japan's slow but growing indie scene. It's time for the indie weebs. March 2023 will mark 10 years since the launch of Bit Summit in Kyoto, an event created with the goal of introducing games from Japanese independent developers to the rest of the world. Also perhaps marks the moment that indie games first really started to gain recognition in Japan, following the indie revolution that swept the game industry in the West after the rise of Steam, Xbox Live Arcade era, and other forms of digital distribution. Octopath Traveler 2 is really good. I see. The indie scene has been integral to the rise of the global industry, with innovative titles like What Remains of Edith Finch, Vampire Survivors, Her Story, Celeste, and so many others becoming critical and commercial success stories, often with the support of crowdfunding and boutique indie publishers. Why have we not seen indies have the same impact in Japan? And the answer into that question would perhaps depend on the definition of indie, which is a term that has become rather amorphous in the West. True. Very amorphous, I would say. The rise of Dojin Soft. It's not that there aren't Japanese developers shunning the big budget publisher model to carve their own path. There have been instances of successful solo projects making waves long before the West's indie boom, such as Touhou Project, a bullet hell shooter that has spawned multiple games and multimedia spin-offs. Cave Story also remains influential as a Metroidvania. These are, however, examples of projects made in their creators' free time. In Japan, such projects are referred to as doujin soft, that is, games created by hobbyists for fun rather than profit. The term doujin literally translates as same person, but can be taken to mean independent self-published works, which can apply to anything from manga to novels to music. It has naturally been a part of this as early as the 1980s, during the rise of the PC, and especially with NEC's popular 8-bit PC 8801, or PC-88 for short, which was capable of producing detailed pixel art. Did it before it was cool, yeah. Seems like it. Seems like it. Let's see what I say. I heard the first one was kind of like a bit of a hit or miss there. But apparently second one is way better though. Not just for the fans of the first one, pretty much. Kinda good overall, eh? Yeah, the indie publishers, man. Cease to say, eh? Be stewing. Started making games in my teenage years, says indie developer Gishi Tatsuka, whose upcoming visual novel game, Retro Game Aliens, takes the PC-88's aesthetic as inspiration. The magazines that would hold contests for you to submit your own games would apply to those competitions. Retro Game Aliens will be a first title Tatsuka has published on Steam as a commercial release. Before now, as well as entering magazine competitions, Tatsuka would make other visual novels on free engines that had a website allowing creators to promote their work. That's because unless devs in Japan are also making their own websites to advertise, there simply isn't an infrastructure in place that lets them share their games with a larger audience. So they like, what do we have really that is like special that is not in Japan? Like Steam is everywhere. What else do we even do then? For doujin communities, there is Comiket, a comic market held biennially in Tokyo, where hundreds of thousands attend to buy and sell doujin works. Again, most of the works are not usually sold for huge profit. Alvin Fu, CEO of doujin game publisher Hanaji Games, explains, outside of Comiket, there isn't a strong community or a place for people to come together to talk to each other about what they do. Let's see what I say. The Rock and Stone say, I see, enjoy, enjoy. I do things because someone told to, yeah. There really was no story. All right. Selling stuff on Homeburn CD. I mean, that was probably kind of everywhere to some extent, I would say. To some extent. To some extent. I mean, how the CDPR came to, to exist even. So yeah, that is not something super unique there. Same was here too, even though like we didn't really have any like actually no, I think we did. I think we did some of it, like those companies. It did straight up piracy, yeah. Well, I mean that's a lot of companies here really too. That's what the only way basically to even distribute games here after all. Starting from like those super magical cartridges for like SNES and stuff, right? With all the games on them. And then with all those CDs with also all the games on them and everything. So yeah, that was a thing. That was a thing. As well as making games in his own time, Tatsuka also works as a game reporter, and it was during a trip at the Tokyo Game Show, specifically the 2013 edition, when organizers first introduced an indie booth, that he became inspired to start exhibiting his own projects at the event. He used to see more doujin groups making their own games in a closed and isolated community. But in recent years, there are more people asking, have you found a publisher? So it's becoming more commercial, and publishers are stepping in to see which games are viable to be published. Yeah, actually, yeah. Companies actually lose money. Well, I mean, if it's like the UN keys and everything, then yeah. Importing indie dev culture, and in my opinion, indie was imported from overseas to Japan. Says back in 1995, developer and indie game survival guide author Takaki Ichiro, who highlights a cultural as well as monetary difference between doujin and indie, where the mindset of the latter might seem no different than a salaried position at a big company, but without long-term stability. I mean, I guess kinda. But if indies are a foreign import, then they also require the same infrastructure, resources, and support in order to grow, which organizations, both native and expat, have been establishing. One example would be an incubator or accelerator program, and as luck would have it, published Marvelous recently launched indie game incubator, the first of its kind in Japan back in 2021. Shisha helped co-found the incubator and is currently overseeing indie developer relations. It was the existence of this program that allowed Nao Shibata to make his debut indie game, Ninja or Die. Former veteran at Natsume Atari, Shibata started as an art designer but had been used to wearing multiple hats at the company, including director for its mobile titles. Feeling like I was running a company within the company, so I was confident with my background I could become a solo developer. But then when I started my own company, I realized that I didn't know enough, so that's why I joined the incubator. Marvelous gets something out of the program by securing titles they onto their release roster, such as Ninja or Die. Program manager Matthias Koala says this is ultimately charity for the company. Usually with programs where they help you and give you money, they have IP rights or something else in return, but we connect developers to a network of over 80 publishers after the program, and all we ask is that they tell us if they're getting an offer, and then we decide if we want to make a counter offer. But in the end, the developer has the freedom to choose who they want to work with. Yeah, yeah, there's a bunch of that shit too. Same with like the Steam, I think. What's the name? Curator program. Also, a lot of devs already not even using that program anymore because there's a bunch of scammers people just requesting keys there and then selling them. Yeah, it's like a lot of those marketplaces are very shady. There were a lot of studios complaining actually. I mean, wasn't it Factorio? I wouldn't say Factorio is like very small, to be honest, at this point. Hey, Sultan, alright. Yeah, Darkwood did, yeah. Darkwood did. Darkwood did post themselves to the torrent trackers. Shibata, Ichijo, and Tatsuki were part of the games industry for many years before going indie. Within development seen as less of a viable career path for those just getting started, and by comparison, like head developer and IGI mentor Anama Takahashi is something of an exception, having made his puzzle platforming hit while still studying at the specialist game design school. In school, teachers ask you to go to bigger companies, but I realized there was an indie scene, so maybe if I could do everything, then I could try the indie route. Although modest when speaking about his career plans, he already made enough profit from Elec Head to invest in another indie project. There wasn't much proof from either side. No, I think there was. I think in the end GTA like said something and they just kind of like pee poofed or something. I think they made like they ended up just making some tool where you can kind of recall or report like stolen keys or something. That's pretty much as far as they did. As much as as they did, which I mean technically kind of just acknowledges the fact that that's the problem. Pretty much. Not to mention there's a lot of scammers in general, just like with Game Maker, right? When I tried to buy the license, scammers. I got my money back though, and the key too. But yeah, that's just how it goes. Yoltan, yeah, seems like it. Well, I mean, it kind of goes both ways, I guess you could say. I think so. Success stories then, but there is a sense that in order for the Japanese indie scene to continue growing, work must be done to establish a visible community. That was the main reason Fu wanted to establish Tokyo Indies, which hosts monthly meetups for developers or anyone interested in being part of the industry. Growing up in the United States, he was part of the Boston indie game dev scene and would go to monthly meetups while in college. We'd meet up at the bar, bring our builds, do these small presentations, and now they have it at MIT as well in the classroom. He explains, adding that he wanted to help establish something similar in Japan. We're getting about 70 to 80 people every month. During COVID, we were doing online streams, but when we started holding it in person again, over 130 people showed up. Everyone missed this. Just as Dojin creators are often isolated within their own circles of interest, Fu acknowledges the indie community can also be quite fragmented. For instance, there might be divisions between people using Unity and those using Unreal, as well as anybody who still considers themselves Dojin. Asobo is an attempt to bridge that gap and unite everyone under one roof. Describing itself as a lighthouse for indie creators in Japan, Asobo is a physical hub in Tokyo funded by sponsors, which members can use as a working space, hold presentations and workshops, and even conduct playtests. Since its founding in late 2019, however, pandemic has put much of its plans on hold, and although the hope is for a reopening later in 2023, so they're still not even reopening yet. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of shit going on. Like they kind of talking about, like the indie scene in Japan just kind of like being born, sorta, and you listen to it, and like, dude, I think there's like most of the countries don't have even that whatsoever. So who is just being developed there? Right now, access to the hub is still limited to Asobu's early members, including Takahashi, who says it was a good environment for promoting Head. And although he self-published the game, he also wanted it to reach an international audience. Asobu's resources and expertise were therefore instrumental for its release, and he credits the organization's co-founder and former community manager Anna Ferrero with the game's translation and trailer. Notably, Takahashi's each profile, where Head was first shared as a demo, is also in English. Lost in a translation, eh? Ensuring a game can reach a global, read English-speaking audience is vital to the success and visibility of Japanese indies. One of the biggest obstacles for Japanese, as well as other non-English-speaking developers who aren't able to fluently communicate in English. For instance, Tetsuka tells us publisher Waku Waku Games decided it would be more profitable to localize retro game aliens in English and Chinese to attract a larger audience in lucrative markets. Bridging the language gap doesn't simply mean prioritizing game localization, though, as there are other linguistic barriers that might prevent devs from even starting a project. Kickstarters, for instance, rely on international bakers. That means it's almost essential to have an English-speaking team run the campaign. If a developer wants their game featured on international showcase like Day of the Devs or Steam Next Fest, it will often require them to submit English documentation. Sobo incidentally also hosts its own regular online showcases. Also, many helpful online resources used by indie developers that haven't been translated to Japanese. Even the communities that Japanese indie developers belong to can be fragmented based on language. What if we pay for translation? Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. It's probably pretty much the same stuff here, I would say. Well, here it's already kind of like people just like instantly going for for someone capable to do translation and recruiting nowadays. I think mostly, from what I've seen at least, mostly already all the recruiting goes with English as a requirement pretty much nowadays. Like in game dev and stuff, no matter the position, English is a requirement here nowadays already. Hey, AI now. Well, yeah, when AI will learn how to translate real well, then maybe you still will need to edit and stuff, though. So you still need someone who kind of understands both languages to do some like proofreading and some editing in terms of, managing to kind of like pass what was intended to be passed. Probably a matter of time. Yeah, I would say so. I'm gonna cross their minds anytime soon. I mean, in Japan, I mean, could it be? Hard to say. Like, I'm not like maybe in modern, like, regeneration is already a little better with language. I mean, I can respect that too. That you kind of like stick to your language and stuff when doing things. But I think knowing both is kind of nice too. Yeah, it was hello. Doing good, doing good. How are you, man? Yeah, Bitsalmon has a Discord server, and it's always the English people speaking, says Shibata. It's probably a cultural thing where we feel like we don't want to intrude in a conversation or start a new topic, especially when there's different languages you might not understand. It's one area IGI has focused on getting right. The program has overseas mentors giving lectures, but provides interpretation for people who need it. Program is also restricted to people living in Japan who speak Japanese. What we're really trying to do is empower local indie developers. And don't want to say we dismiss expats, but I feel like the local scene is in so much more need for help. More surprising is that given Japan's reputation as the spiritual home of video games, there's virtually no support from the government for developers in the form of grants, sponsorships, or a tax relief. Didn't have anything like this here until like recently, basically, when they, decided to replace the imported stuff and like just gave a bunch of money to different companies to develop their own games, which probably gonna end up fucking stolen, or the game's gonna be just shit. Why sponsor when the industry is booming? Because it helps bring more stuff and helps make more money in the end too. Because like for example, that's what like the German government doing with sponsoring, and a bunch of games I played really was sponsored by government. There's a lot of actually a lot of indie games that I played. First Look Friday and stuff. You can quite often in the loading screen and stuff, you can see that it's like some sort of like region in Germany, for example, or some like country, mostly European countries, that is like funding it, sorta. So you kind of want it, you kind of need it. It just brings like more interesting things to life. The problem is like the tax relief, for example, as we saw before in UK, for example, is used by such poor, struggling companies like Rockstar and everything, for example, and like used really well too, like tens, if not even like hundred something millions, basically in tax relief. That was like a couple of years ago. I remember there was like a whole like ruckus about it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's a bunch like Elix, for example. Piranha Bytes was at least for Elix and Elix 2, I think they were sponsored by German government, maybe like some of the lands, right? Like the region's government. But yeah, it was basically that stuff. Silton, I see. That is nice, though. That is nice. Yeah, a bunch like Dorf Romantic, for example, was I think, if I remember correct, also it was made by students. I don't remember if they got some funding. Um, Another one also from Berlin that was, and another from Berlin was the one where you just like build stuff and destroy, like with physics and everything. Forgot. Abris, yeah, Abris. That one also was like students from Berlin. I think they also were kind of supported, but I'm not sure. Not sure about that exactly. I mean, the thing is, like, there's always space to grow. Like, they might be doing insane, but that doesn't mean that they can do better. And again, you also kind of like, by not supporting some of the smaller stuff, smaller devs, smaller studios, you also kind of just like let everything just kind of like get focused in those big companies, and uh, and then you kind of like, putting all the eggs in one basket, sort of, because at some point they might be like, oh shit, kind of paying too much tax here, dude. Maybe it's time to optimize it or something. And then again, it's kind of like too much power and stuff concentrated in like some few companies. That's why it's nice to do like more like indie stuff and everything and support it. So you can get more up and coming, people and everything. And also like the smaller companies and smaller businesses usually in many cases is like one of like the main motion factors for the economy in many countries, because a lot of big corporates kind of like already like getting all the money and piecing out somewhere in Cyprus or something, right? Or in some other offshore and everything, and doing all those sussy things and stuff. And the small guys usually just kind of don't even bother, and like they don't have money to get an accountant, on a regular basis, to do all this sussy stuff. So they just kind of like pay their taxes and everything and whatever. Even though I guess some obviously do some stuff too like this, but yeah, like even from my experience, for example, like there would be like way to like do some things too, but like why? When it's like not that crazy big of a tax, I rather just pay it and it's just easier. Which again, right now it's only donos and donos are not being taxed, so it's even easier. But before, a year ago, it was just by paying that tax just because it's like simple that way. Germany spends 50 billion euro a year in their game fund. Yeah, not bad. I mean, it's not even like that crazy in like the country scale, but it's good for indie studios. That's gonna be a lot of projects funded, pretty much. Pretty much. Kind of international outreach and cultural exchange where Japanese indie developers can have a platform is something everyone would like to see more of. Takahashi hopes to be able to submit a future game for award consideration like the IGF or attend PAX, explaining that he really looks up to these international shows. There we go. Because if Japanese indies aren't getting the spotlight, then Western developers influenced by Japanese culture and aesthetics are, be it the Kurosawa-inspired Trek to Yomi or countless retro pixel art titles. For Japanese players discovering indie titles, the origins are also becoming blurred as more Western publishers have gotten savvy with localizing their games into Japanese. Anybody that is an indie dev emulates the Japanese 90s style of pixel art, but when Japanese indie games make the same thing, our games are not easy to find. That notion that Western indie publishers with more resources can easily beat Japanese indies at their own game uncomfortably recalls the infamous GDC panel where a Fez creator Phil Fish, whose own game drew inspiration from classic Nintendo games, told Japanese developer Makoto Goto that Japanese games just suck. What's funny is that how I moved here and got my job here, because on my first trip to Japan, A message got on LinkedIn saying, I heard what happened and that I wanted to work as a programmer in Japan, so he invited me for drinks, which was how I was introduced to my old boss. So if Phil Fish hadn't made that comment, Tokyo Indies wouldn't be here right now. Damn son, that guy. That guy was like some fiesta and a half, I think, in concentrated form, if I remember correct. Paying them monies to make them games. Alright, let's mark this as read. And let's go get that news recap going. Oof. There we go. Alright. Alright. Let's go. Start with the news. Gonna pay you to make games then. It's also kind of like part of the thing, like, you know, government sponsoring like movies being made and stuff. It's like, you know, at this point games are objects of art. I mean, they always were, but now that's already kind of, I think, general consensus that they are. So that's pretty much, you know, kind of like supporting people making some art, some museums and stuff. It's pretty much the same supporting game devs too. If they can actually produce something, you know, that is worth being called the object of art, you know. I mean, the service isn't art. It's the art of you know, art of stealing your money. You gotta respect the hustle, after all. There we go. All right. All right. Well, I mean, same as, you know, you can say like some cape shit movies, right? Some Marvel stuff and everything is also not exactly art. Then there's art house movies. And then there is, you know, kind of art house games.